my little gnome. um, I wanted to talk today about like post-psychosis depression. I'm not sure if this is real. I just know how it affects me. I've had quite a lot of intense psychotic episodes over the last 12 years, and these have ranged from really terrifying ones to really euphoric ones, believing that I'm the Messiah and that I'm going to save the world and it's going to be instantly better. And the thing is that delusions have, like, when they're in a psychotic episode, there's like a post psychotic experience. So the best way to explain it is, imagine that I believe that I'm some divine being and I develop all these thoughts and delusions that I'm going to be rich and I'm going to be famous, and all of a sudden a miracle is going to happen and the world is going to see me as a divine being, and I'm developing all these thoughts, and all these thoughts have lots of like receptors to them, right? They're neurons, they have lots of dopamine receptors to them, and the dopamine receptors allows you to feel good. And so when you're following these delusional lines of thinking, you're developing lots of positive emotions with them. And then once the psychotic episode fades and you go, well, I was just crazy and all this stuff, and maybe it's disproven in some way, or you end up getting help and you go on medication, it's like the early fostering a good relationship. In a way, you set your heart up, you set your emotions up, you imagine a future, you develop all these expectancies of how you're going to feel and what you're going to be like in this delusional world, and then maybe the relationship doesn't work and your heart breaks. And that's the only way to really explain it. And then afterwards you go through this immense depression because all of what you thought was going to happen hasn't happened. And I think you can liken it to everyday experience. There's so many times in our lives, right, that we think something's going to happen, and maybe we're going to get a promotion, maybe we're going to, I don't know, spend the rest of our lives with a partner, and then that all falls away, and you're left kind of in this weird state where you don't know what to think anymore, you don't know what to expect, and a depression kind of overcomes you. It's very much like that experience, except it can be a lot more intense because, so much of this delusional world that you've created has been something that wasn't real. And I would imagine that it's similar to people that climb Mount Everest, like, what's after that? Seriously, you might look at every other mountain and go, oh, well, this wasn't as great as Mount Everest. Oh, well, this is no Mount Everest. I wonder if people are like that. But it's kind of like that, because once you've had these psychotic episodes, which can sometimes be immensely gratifying and incredibly euphoric, after that you're like, well, this is a boring world to be in, And I guess you kind of, one way that I look at it as well is just finding the beauty in the little things, because it does really change you. Delusional or not delusional, what you believe to be true has a consequence to it. And once that framework of belief has crumbled, you're left in the ruin of all that disappointment. And, I think I spoke to someone a while ago that had a schizophrenic delusion of romance. They believed that they were in a romantic relationship with someone that was famous. And we both related to how once that delusional experience fades away and it gets corrected, you go on medication or get the help that you need, you're left with this void, because it's identical to a heartbreak. When you're in a psychotic episode, you really do believe these things, and so the brain believes it, and then the brain has to go through it the healthy way, but it's a healthy way produced from something that was unhealthy and wasn't real, but it still has to go through those motions in order to heal itself. It's really strange. It's also a great level of motivation to not encourage delusional thinking and to watch yourself carefully in case that you are going into a psychotic episode, because even if it's a really fun psychotic episode, because a lot of them are, it can have really severe consequences later on, like months worth of depression. And God forbid, you do something even worse in the delusion episode. Like, I've heard people spend their entire bank balances and all this stuff. So there's like a lot of, it's very strange because you're not perceiving reality properly, but the consequences are very real. and even the emotional consequences are very real. I've I've talked about this in my Jordan Peterson delusion, where it was kind of like a strange interplay of expectations and delusional thinking that culminated in an emotional experience that was very real but detached from reality. And that had severe effects. I spent months in bed after that. I was, completely destroyed. And it's strange because it kind of makes you feel like the suffering is stupid and it's insane, but it's if anything, actually, it's the healthy way, I suppose, of getting rid of that delusional experience, a psychotic episode. And so, in some way, you should just allow yourself to move through the depression naturally and not resist it. I found that when I was getting depressed, there was this desire to fight against it and go back into the delusion, almost like I wanted to return to the place I know provided me with good feelings to resist having to feel the depression from that. So, after the Peterson delusion, I was so destroyed that I was laying there, in my bed a lot of the time, thinking, well, it could be real. I don't know. And then I was looking for evidence of that. And I suppose that's where like good knowledge of the condition of psychosis and what the symptoms are like and how you can think delusionally really is important, because if you can catch yourself in the early thoughts before you lose touch, then you can prevent yourself from worsening yourself. It's so important. It's so understated, the power of thoughts today, that it's something that most people don't realize, and that it's important to be able to ground yourself too in something like a reality construct, right, or in a good social environment, because people will keep you in check. That's kind of what I want to do in my Discord. I really want my Discord to grow into a nice community of people that really understand psychosis, schizophrenia, and what those conditions manifest as, because then they can socially regulate each other, right? I can't think of any better dream and any better aid for recovery than having an incredible, beautiful number of people all together that can prevent other people from getting delusional. Like, oh, well, what you're saying there is careful with that. That doesn't sound too grounded. And just to have a social environment of people you can trust. I spoke to a guy recently that's writing a book who suffered from schizophrenia called, I don't know if he'd want me to talk about it, but I won't hint to it. But actually, I won't talk about that because I don't know if he'd like me to talk about it. But it perfectly encapsulates this inability for social environments to support each other and not allow them to get all delusional. There's this inability, I think, a lot of the times, where if someone is talking a bit crazy, people might just shy away and they don't want to correct that person. But that's really what you need. And I know that a lot of my delusional thinking could have been prevented if I'd had good people around me that would have been able to moderate what I was saying in a kind-hearted way. I've tried other social groups, and half the reason I want to, promote this kind of server and this community is I've joined other groups that are just debate groups. And I might have just been thinking crazy things. I might not have believed in the things I was thinking about, but people will quite quickly victimize you and condemn you for what you say. And it's almost not conducive to the spirit of a human being. The spirit of a human being is something that changes and grows and evolves. And so if you try to label or you try to condemn someone for what might be crazy opinions, it can get really negative very quickly.